So this is 23:38 hours GMT. The stated time is 23:40 hours GMT on Monday, 20th of December 2021, part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, coming to wherever you are from London in the UK via the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial, not on cable networks, but just on the internet. This is Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast as part A of the BabyAngelGeronimo editions. BabyAngelGeronimo being the world's best, most honest, most authentic, most reliable, most consistent, ethical, moral witness to the corruption, the cruelty, the criminality, the unfitness for purpose, and the breaking of the law brazenly by the corrupt, criminal, evil-doing cabal fronted by the congenital liar Boris Johnson. And BabyAngelGeronimo is the longest lasting witness to the corruption and criminality, operated primarily via the frontage called DEFRA, the depraved DEFRA department, since 2017. And the BabyAngelGeronimo editions update in every edition on the ongoing corruption and criminality by the Boris Johnson fronted cabal, as well as contextually adding to the evidence and the narrative and the agenda of the ethical and moral witness, BabyAngelGeronimo, all the other unfolding evidence and instances of the corruption and criminality fronted by the perpetrating congenital liar Boris Johnson. For example, the photograph of the criminal Johnson's cabal defying the rules that were imposed on the others in quote society during 2020. The pictures emerge. Well, one picture has been exclusively published by The Guardian, but there are other pictures that have not been yet published, but they will be published or are about to be published. This photographic, the evidence of pictorial kind of evidence, photographic evidence of the wanton breaking of the law by the congenital liar Boris Johnson himself and his cabal, particular members of his cabal. This is evidence, accepted evidence, acceptable evidence, obvious evidence by all criteria and tests of evidence accepted right across the planet Earth. But the cabal fronted by Boris Johnson has issued, of course belatedly, because the picture has been published for hours before the cabal began to start to deny, and all kinds of out of this world explanations have been issued by the cabal fronted by the congenital liar Boris Johnson, including saying that this was a working meeting. Looking at the picture, the only evidence of materials present on the tables and the benches or the kind of stool is the presence of bottles of drink. Bottles of drink often are not associated with work. Bottles of drink are associated with not work. So when that first one didn't stick, the lying cabal issued the stupid claim that hard-working members of the staff and members of the government were seen in the picture taking a much-earned rest from the very hectic, high-pressure work that they had just been involved in. So they admitted that that was not a work meeting. That was relaxing. That was recreation. And the point of the ban on all the other people in society is that not more than 2 people were supposed to meet. Now, this picture shows anything between 17 to 18 people present in 3 different clusters in the picture. Outside, that is behind the often photographic front of the number 10 Downing Street. It's behind the Downing Street. It's in the garden behind the Downing Street front door. Now, Nadine Dorries has been exposed. That is her. That is her on the kind of page 7 of the Times of Monday, the 20th of December, 2021. Nadine Dorries was taking part in a WhatsApp group of MPs, apparently, including her and another 99, that according to the reports. So that's a kind of WhatsApp communication. And the WhatsApp group was taking part, and I'll put both pages of the Times today before the camera. And that is the Times Monday, the 20th of December. And it says, wounded Johnson plots next move, but critics scent blood. And in the center is this quotation from the WhatsApp communications taking place between various members, especially Andrew Bridgen, Marcus Fish, Jeffrey Clinton Brown, Nadine Dorries, Steve Baker, Andrew Bridgen, Connor Barnes, Steve Baker. Now, the point at which Nadine Dorries was ousted, kicked out of the WhatsApp, is recorded here as 21:18 hours. And it's a response by Steve Baker to Nadine Dorries' statement, which was, the hero is the Prime Minister who delivered Brexit. I'm aware, as someone said today, that regicide is in the DNA of Conservative Party. But a bit of loyalty to the person who won an 83 majority and delivered Brexit wouldn't go amiss. Steve Baker at that point came in and removed Nadine Dorries, according to the Times. Because Steve Baker responded, enough is enough, 21 81 within the minute, the same minute that Nadine Dorries did her WhatsApp statement. And Andrew Bridgen supported Steve Baker, saying, "About time, thanks, Steve," at 21:27. Then Connor Barnes is reported here. "Absolutely right, Nadine. Memory seems to be very short." That is from Connor Barnes. The Steve Baker response is longer to that one, and it's the longest response he has given. And it says the majority was one for many reasons. Among them, two were critical. The two reasons were critical for the majority of the 83 that Nadine Dorries refers to. Number one, the deal he, that is Johnson, voted for was rejected. Number two, someone, but not him, that is Johnson, persuaded Nigel Farage not to run against Conservative incumbents in parliamentary seats at the December 2019 election. Now, Steve Baker continues, if Boris had not benefited from both, that is, if the Conservatives didn't have the majority resulting from Nigel Farage not running against Conservatives, then we, that is the Conservatives, would be on the other benches, that is the Conservatives would be the opposition on the opposition benches. And then he says, true story. And yes, Connor, some members are indeed very short. Some memories are indeed very short. But I suggest we not argue in this group. We have troubles enough in our immediate future. That is Steve Baker recognizing that this might get out. And it did get out. It has got out, because that is what we are doing. We are looking at the publication of the key communications on the WhatsApp platform or account. What is happening with the headline that the wounded Johnson is, of course, what this WhatsApp exchange is about. And the man he has lost as the Brexit minister, David Frost. Instead of criticizing Johnson, he is actually praising Johnson in the resignation letter, so-called. And the last paragraph in Johnson's resignation letter, so-called, is, together we have put this country onto a new path. I am confident that under your leadership, this newly free Britain can succeed and prosper hugely. I wish you and the government every success in that. Now, clearly that is a contradiction to his own decision to leave the government. Now, this piece about wounded Johnson plots next move is got, the piece is byline to Stephen Swinford and Rhys Blakely. Now, the first paragraph of that wounded Johnson is, Boris Johnson must feel as if he is under siege. How the liars disguise their lying. I mean, the main package on the Times is saying that Johnson is wounded and is under siege. And yet reading the contents of the David Frost letter next to it is completely different, completely opposite of what wounded Johnson means. And Johnson under siege means. A week that was already one of the worst of his premiership culminated on Saturday night in the resignation of one of his closest allies, Lord Frost, the Brexit minister. An ally of the Prime Minister said that Johnson, another ally, it should read. The Johnson had taken Frost's resignation personally, especially after the Conservative Party's disastrous performance in the North Shropshire by-election on Thursday. So what this report actually consists of is contradictory statements and assertions. Absolutely contradictory. Now, quite apart from the fact that Johnson's cabal never observed the rules that it imposed on the rest of society, starting with the first series of lockdowns. There have never been, and there are no reference to the reality of what this virus does, or the reality of the behavior of this virus, which is what we have been pointing out right from the beginning. Every single time we have referred to this, is that the newspapers, the so-called Fleet Street newspapers, are worse than stooges for the corrupt cabal. And all the tabloid papers, including, let's say, the Daily Mirror, the so-called, are giving the official names, despite the fact that we have got our own original descriptions of the titles based on the lying. They have been the Daily Mirror, the Star, the Express, the Mail, and the Scum, that is the 5 main tabloids, are being paid millions of pounds as part of the advertising blitz for the vaccine program. So all the papers, the tabloid ones, are wrapped around with this NHS, 4 pages of the NHS advertising altogether. This is worth millions of pounds. It's absolutely millions of pounds the NHS is being made to pay to these tabloids. That is the reason why the tabloids are more than desperately promoting every single hype for vaccine and every single scare story about the spread of the Omicron virus. Essentially, this is Fleet Street is about the political career of the cabal and the crooks, fronted by Johnson. But even the Guardian, which has actually exclusively published, according to its claim, that picture taken of the rule breakers in the Downing Street garden. Even the Guardian, as we keep pointing out, is following a corrupt narrative, an appeasing narrative, a narrative that doesn't actually expose the real truth about Johnson's lying and dishonesty and corruption and irresponsibility and cruelty. So, where do you turn? Where do observers, people who are looking at the evidence, who want to establish what the evidence is of the behavior of the regime, the cabal fronted by congenital liar Boris Johnson, where do people turn to identify what the evidence is, what the truth is? Well, the logical point, the first point, the first port, the first direction, the logical first direction would be the so-called elected opposition in the House of Commons. But there is nothing in the House of Commons to be found as a source of the truth or as the source of the truth, because the so-called leader of the so-called opposition party, Keir Starmer, is the political murderer of the opposition party, as he has shown by voting for Johnson, by keeping Johnson in post. Because if he had voted against Johnson's latest move, which has been opposed by 100, at least 100 MPs, 100 conservative MPs, then Johnson would have been, if Starmer had actually voted against Johnson's move, that 100 MPs voted against, then Johnson would have been out. Because that would be the nearest to a vote of no confidence in the incumbent congenital liar. But Starmer voted for Johnson. So Johnson is still in place, and the piece that wounded Johnson piece in the Times on pages 6 and 7 doesn't acknowledge the key role that Starmer has played in politically murdering the Labour Party. So we shall come back to the other aspects of the congenital liar, criminal, Boris Johnson lawbreaker, in the context of the lies that BabyAngelGeronimo continues to witness 247. We move on to the role of the Bradford Council, the crooks, the criminals in Bradford, in the Bradford Council. This is a piece by Charlotte Weiss, Northern correspondent. And this piece is about the baby Star Hudson and the role of the local council. Now, the heading, it may not be very clear because of the light, but the heading, I shall read the heading. The Star Hobson, that is, Star is the name, first name of the baby girl. Star Hobson Council left children at risk for years. Now, remember what we say about all the councils in England. We say exclusively, we assert exclusively on the evidence that all the local councils in England, including Tower Hamlets Council, including Newham Council, including Hackney Council, including Greenwich, Lewisham, all the other councils are corrupt. That's the starting point. Our movement knows more about Tower Hamlets Council or Hackney Council and Newham Council as compared to the extent of our knowledge, factual evidential knowledge, compared to those three with the knowledge that we have about other councils. Now, this boy, this girl, this child was murdered in a place called Keighley, West Yorkshire in September 2020. And it refers to Bradford Council Social Services. And it says that the child's state of being attacked and assaulted and abused and injured came after at least 5 referrals to Bradford Social Services. The stupid Times doesn't give the full official name of this stupid council. There is no such thing as Bradford Social Services. It has to be Bradford City Council or Bradford Council, but it doesn't say that. This is only a tip of the iceberg of the lying, ignorance, and illiteracy on the part of Fleet Street. So it says it came to Bradford Social Services was made aware during over 8 months by 5 referrals. Now this evil murderess, the lesbian murderess, Savannah Brockhill, has been jailed for 25 years last week for murder. And Star's biological mother, the lesbian victim of the murderess, Savannah Brockhill, was convicted of causing or allowing her death. And the Times continues stupidly. This sentence doesn't refer to Bradford Council. Now, we have mentioned before the role of Fleet Street avoid fully naming the guilty council in each case. And this is what is happening in this piece of about the torture and murder of this child and the role played by the Bradford Council. The Criminal Times doesn't mention Bradford Council in full. And the piece, Star Hobson Council left children at risk for years. The headline should have named the council in full. And the various itsy bitsy pieces that this item contains in the piece don't actually amount to a political, democratic, ethical demand narrative that all the councils are corrupt and unfit for purpose. And based on their corruption, the councils should be declared non-existent. I mean, this is a kind of ironic position because the conservatives like Gove and others are plotting to scrap most of the northern councils and foist on the place of the scrapped council each place, an executive mayor. That's not what we are asking for. We are saying that the existing councils should be scrapped because they are not delivering democracy, they are not delivering accountability. They should be replaced by democratic, accountable regimes in each place. Now, the Conservatives and the Labour Party have been for decades kind of imitating one another, copying one another, instead of admitting the duties, democratic audit and accountability duties. The two parties have been in competition as liars, competing as liars, competing as the more crafty liar against the rivals. And the electors, the communities, and especially those most vulnerable in need of their services, like Star Hobson, and then earlier, few weeks earlier, the child Arthur, and some years earlier, the child baby P, and other children, they are completely treated as non-existent in the narrative. The Times being a supporter of the Times newspaper, being supporter of the Boris Johnson cabal and the conservative scum, has got this Charlotte Weiss piece filled up with quotations from conservatives and the liberal Democrats. That is a clear decision to isolate the Labour Party in the council, because the Labour Party is the one that has been in control of the council. So what this shows is that the Labour Party, although it is not the Conservative Party, the Labour Party has been criminally liable for persistent negligence of its duties towards the likes of the baby star Hudson. Now, we'll leave that there for the time being. We'll come back later in this edition. There is a law report in the Times on page 51 which says, effect of calculation of the benefit cap was not ideal but not irrational. Now that gives away the game about the role of the independent judiciary, the myth. The judges are prostitutes and liars and stooges and criminals sitting in the posts of judges. They're immoral, they are unethical, and they are outrageously against the concept of justice, universally defined, the concept of fairness, universally defined, the concept of due process, universally defined, the concept of international obligations, internationally defined. This one is a ruling by the Court of Appeal dated the 20th of December, that is published date. And the judgment was actually made dated 8th of October 2021. And it's Justice Underhill, Lord Justice Haddon Cabe, and Lady Justice Simia. And the reference is 2021 EWCA SIB 1454. That's the Court of Appeal. And it's a judgment which is a rubber stamp for the deprivation, want, and poverty creation, otherwise known as the DWP, Department for Work and Pensions. This is complete lie absolute lie, and there is no narrative about the lying, corrupt, criminal role played by the high courts in this country. If you look at the contents of the newspapers, for example, this is the I newspaper, which is the again wrapped around by the NHS advertisements, which must be altogether millions of pounds worth of bribing the Fleet Street papers. Now, what is this mental slave is saying? This is the mental slave is a diversity advertisement. Arj Singh. So Arj Singh is doing the stooge role and finding ways to appease the liar Boris Johnson. No, nobody is saying that Johnson is a liar. They're talking about tactics, not about ethics, morality, and dishonesty. But the same Arj Singh has got a piece on page 4 of the same I newspaper where he is deputy political editor. The heading is Tories Manifesto pledges were highly unlikely to be delivered. Instead of saying that the Tories lied in their manifesto, he puts the kind of animation in the third party or third person on the manifesto. And there is this piece by Camilla Cavendish, which actually was published first in the Financial Times or Financial Crimes. The heading is The NHS faces a bleak midwinter as staffing crisis hits home. Now, as we said, the NHS has been in crisis continuously from the very moment it was launched in the late 1940s. Because the NHS ideologically has never been something that the scum party, that is the corrupt criminal, antisocial, lying, cruel conservatives. Conservatives always have always been opposed to the idea of society. In fact, the conservatives are the antisocial party right from the beginning. The concept, the ideology, the purpose is to deny the existence of society, therefore, existence of responsibility, social responsibility, and care. And the conservatives are an agency for big business crooks and robbers. And the big business crooks who dominate the kind of ranks of the conservatives in the House of Peers do so as part of that narrative. If there was an ethical political party or movement in this country, in the UK, then the House of Peers would not exist, not in the sense, in the shape that it does exist. And the House of Commons would be free, mostly free, of the presence of this scum party. But there is no ideologically ethical, moral party in this country. As we say, Keir Starmer has politically murdered the Labour Party, or what remained of the Labour Party. And everything else he does, Keir Starmer, under the kind of banner, bogus banner of the Labour Party, is a political attack on the idea of the Labour Party, the idea of the opposition party. So that's at the political level, at the level of the parliament. And as we say, at the level of the Court of Appeal, that has the latest rubber stamp role that the Court of Appeal has played for the deprivation, want, and poverty creation wing of the Conservatives cabal fronted by the congenital liar Boris Johnson, shows that there is no independent judiciary. And the mess goes on. And the Fleet Street Papers is typified by the scum and by the scar. These are obscene in the universal sense of the term. Now, in contrast with the image of Johnson caught early on in the kind of restrictions in the first year 2020, the daily buying Boris Johnson graph has got this headline, front page, that is in contrast to that one. He says that Johnson looks at plea to limit mixing at Christmas. That's the line. And Fraser Nelson, who is the editor of The Spectator, is raising the question, is SAGE, the scientific body, cooking up gloom to order? That is to say, the scary stories, the scare stories that they're spreading based on maximum numbers of people who are going to, as they say, die as a result of COVID, is not true, because Fraser Nelson believes that there is an order, there is an agenda to create scare so that people are scared into accepting draconian, and as Marcus Fish said, Nazi German style orders and restrictions can be carried out or can be enforced on the people. That's what Fraser Nelson is saying. Now, the other side of Fraser Nelson's argument or comment is this: if this can be done, that is to say, if the masses can be scared into accepting various claims for restrictions, while the evidence remains very sketchy and non-existent, then it follows the other scare stories about the migrants taking over this country, scare stories about the Turks invading Britain if the British didn't vote to Brexit. And those things are absolutely, equally, corruptly made up. And there is a piece in the daily buying Boris Johnson graph on the comment page by Ian Austin, who was a Labour MP for Dudley North between 2005 and 2019. His heading is "Labour is still a long way away from number 10 Downing Street." Keir Starmer will need a bold vision to answer his critics and turn a polling bounce into a major swing. And similar items. Now, what Ian Austin will never say and has not said is the truth about why Keir Starmer is not the right person to actually take the political reins away from the Conservatives and put it in the hands of what used to be the pre-murder Labour Party. Ian Austin is not accepting the truth that Starmer is the murderer of the Labour Party. And the Beaverbrook Daily Express is shameless, absolutely shameless. It says in the trailer on page one for the pages 8 and 9 main piece, in Liz we trust. Foreign Secretary to lead Brexit talks. Now, all of that is a lie. So all of the Fleet Street papers are, of course, using ecstatic language to report the award, the Sports Personality of the Year award, given by the BBC to Emma Raducanu. And Emma Raducanu is the only one whose photograph and whose praise are equally gleefully covered by all the papers in Fleet Street. That's the only gleeful piece. As is the case on the front page of the Daily Mail. Which says to Boris Johnson, "Don't ruin our Christmas again, Boris." And there is this completely false contradiction being created by Fleet Street or via Fleet Street between the new lockdown, and liberty, which is the kind of concept they're peddling via the rhetorical use of the word Christmas. And the Daily Mail has got a completely stupid piece by an Anglophile Swede called Johan Hekulius. And the editorial is, "Now it's time to prove you are true blue, Prime Minister." And then the smaller editorial is, "Trust on EU." This is absolutely typical lying fantasy. And there are more sick-making stupidity by Andrew Pierce. And there is a piece by Barbara Davies in the Mail on pages 24 and 25, headlined, "How Tycoon's Ex-Wife Got Pregnant with an Embryo They Froze, Sparking a Legal Battle So Toxic It Takes Your Breath Away." It does. And Jeffrey, the perennial liar, is given another week of stealing from Charles Dickens and inventing a version in his name to get more money. By stealing, plagiarizing Charles Dickens, which is something unprecedented. And yet, the Daily Mail, far from condemning the thief, plagiarist, Archer, is celebrating the theft and the plagiarism. And the Daily Mirror is as corrupt and as stupid. Christmas is a slogan. It's a pretext. It is a fantasy and it is not true. There is the bombshell poll piles the pressure on Boris Johnson now. It's the Daily Mirror organizing the poll, obviously. And they're saying that 51% of Tory voters think the government doesn't act with integrity. Of course, it doesn't. This is the Mirror is calling Johnson dishonest. And 53% of Tory voters think the government is honest, and 63% of voters believe Johnson lacks integrity. And 66% of voters believe Johnson lies. I mean, we have been saying Johnson lies right from the word go. And Johnson has admitted, in effect, that he's a liar. He has been lying. And when Eddie Mayer interviewed Johnson in his, that is Eddie Mayer's one-off role as standing in presenter while Andrew Marr was away for that occasion, Eddie Mayer put the following words to Johnson, in his face in the studio during the recording, during the interview. You, Boris Johnson, are a nasty piece of work, aren't you? Johnson didn't really answer. He was reduced to desperately looking for various words and phrases, but he couldn't answer. And the Mirror talks about Brenda and the Christmas. The only people who do the Christmas are, of course, the traders. And there is absolutely no real analysis in Fleet Street papers of the lies of the state. Moving a bit away from the actual Little England, there is a piece in the Financial Crimes about Pakistan trying to calm anger in Balochistan about Beijing Belt and Road Port Project. The essence of this piece, as we see it, is that there is a $60 billion China-Pakistan economic corridor. Now compare that with the role of the so-called anti-Chinese Americans, and you find that the Americans, who should be grateful for the role Pakistan has been playing to make American invasion Afghanistan a success? Because Pakistan has taken millions of Afghans as refugees leaving Afghanistan during the last 30 years. This began before the Tony Blair and George W. Bush imposed their version of the kind of empire on Afghanistan after the kind of removal of the Russians as the imperialists. And as we have been saying, not in this particular edition, but generally in our narrative, evidential narrative, the RSPC, the RSPB, these so-called Royal Society charitable organizations allegedly operated to protect birds and animals from cruelty are themselves covers for organized massacres of birds and animals. We shall be elaborating on all of those later. And we shall go back to the corruption of the Johnson-fronted cabal. So there is a short item about a London Metropolitan Police officer called Scott Barrett. It's a child misconduct case. He has been charged with a child misconduct case. What we have referred to in relation to the murder of baby Star Hudson in the context of the complicit, corrupt role played by the Bradford Council is a very small sample of the heavy, massive amount of murderous complicity by local councils across England, Wales, and Scotland. In the UK, within quotation marks, of course, there exists no platform, there exists no remedy through any recognizable judicial agency or platform to seek remedies against the murderous complicity and cruelty perpetrated daily by the local councils. So this applies to the policing as well, has been extensively revealed during the various events following the kidnap, the rape, the torture, and the murder of the innocent victim of the criminal Wayne Couzens, Sarah Everard. That policing is non existent, and as is the remedy against the corrupt collusion, criminal collusion, and abuse of policing posts by policing post holders. And this is extended, and it can be extrapolated and applied to the behavior of the absolute majority of the members of parliament. Even when they are not under control by the political murderers like Keir Starmer, who has colluded openly in the corrupt ploy by Boris Johnson to stay in post. Independent members of parliament, or to put it differently, members of parliament assessed in their activities independently of any group or party or any whip or party management. Members of parliament assessed acting independently of any kind of line management that they have to observe and obey. Independent action by the MPs, most of them, or most independent actions by MPs are corrupt, criminal. And in the Constitution, there exists no formally written constitution as such. But in the de facto constitutional arrangements that the UK has, members of parliament are given impunity from accountability. So therefore, most people in contact with the relevant local members of parliament, or most people who are entitled to honest, democratic, ethical, moral, and timely representation and help and support from the particular MP in their area and their constituency, are deprived of those because there is no accountability. There is no regime that actually holds members of parliament to accountability. And as we have said, in the context of the criminality of Tower Hamlets Council, which staged the bogus prosecution over housing fraud of the Member of Parliament for Poplar and Limehouse, Afsana Begum. Termless Council did stage that bogus prosecution. Not a single member of the council, elected council, nor the other member of parliament for the other constituency in the two constituency bara of Taramlers, Rushnara Ali. These are not democratically active. These are not ethically active. These are not socially conducive to the rights of the electorate, either council-based electorate or the parliamentary constituency-based electorate in context whenever they're required to put their or cast their votes. So Taramless as a borough continues to fester in an atmosphere of corruption, rubber stamping, criminality, collusion, complicity, and crimes committed by the local council and the local other parts of the UK state based in the borough of Taramlers. And it is absolutely a fact of the criminality on the part of Taramlers Council and the bureaucracy that there has continued, persisted the number of people without proper housing or people on the housing waiting list being over 20,000. That cannot be a constant fact if the council was doing the job. The council doesn't do the job because the council, Taramlers Council, is a corrupt criminal operation. Anyone who needs to fact check on the assertions that I have just made is welcome to check the publicly available sources of evidence, fact about each of the aspects of the corruption that I have referred to. First of all, the search engine Google is itself corruptly operated, as are the other platforms. Facebook, Twitter, all the others are corruptly operated on the evidence because they are not active against corruption. Many of the complaints made against the crooks operating various accounts are ignored. And there is no agenda to directly, objectively hold the crooks to account and stop them. So the Google kind of search engine option is an obsolete, dead, and diversionary option because most of the information that used to be available on Google has been blocked from access by ordinary users, ordinary members of society, ordinary investigators. So, for example, the result of a search query that used to have, let's say, 1,000 or 100,000 results, that number has been reduced drastically to being in 3 digits or less. And you cannot query the hidden results, and the Google option that you can always kind of make your entry, your appearance forgotten, is not an actual civil liberties or personal liberties option. It's an option given to crooks and liars to hide their evidence. They hide the evidence about their misconduct, their criminality. And this is a very serious denial of access to the records and the evidence of the crimes and the criminality. When Tower Hamlets Council staged that bogus prosecution about housing fraud, artificially, dishonestly charging Afsana Begum, it did so with the certainty that Afsana Begum would not be convicted. Not because the evidence was actually presented of what housing fraud took place, but because the court system, the prosecution system, is highly vulnerable to abuse and misuse. And it goes on. For example, the serial offender, the so-called celebrity, Katie Price, keeps being prosecuted and keeps being allowed impunity. She's a multimillionairess, and she is also a bankrupt at the same time. When Afsana Begum was declared not guilty, it did not make her free from liability to campaign against housing corruption, housing criminality in Tower Hamlets. So she has not campaigned against housing crime and criminality in Tower Hamlets. Afsana Begum has not campaigned against the corruption that persists in Tower Hamlets Council, through Tower Hamlets Council and through the Labour Party. Because the Labour Party essentially in Tower Hamlets is an operation, corrupt, criminal operation. So what we shall be doing, we shall be calling this one to an end. It is just 1.5 hours, I think. And on all the themes and all the evidential issues, we shall be continuing in the next available edition.